maybe there's a little tiny pinprick of light, and you try to focus on the light and not the black. And this man over here, John Pelafudis, was working for a congressional friend of mine named Duncan Hunter. And he came to see me. And he said, that little minister that you know, that you met in Pittsburgh, who your mother liked, he and I grew up together. Now Stu is living in Pittsburgh and John is living in Washington. And John then dedicated the next, how long, John? Months to trying to get me healed, which he did. And the story is, through a long, long process, I've become a better man, despite a brutally difficult period. And you know, we all know how tough life can be. The editor of, the PR guy that's traveling with me with St. Martin's, I find out yesterday, he said, my wife and I had gone down to Florida, we bought a house, everything was going great. And then she had a major heart problem. Out of the blue, out of nowhere. So one of the little sections of this book is, where do you go when the water rises? And I'm not going around trying to convert everybody because, you know, if you're a humanist, I admire what you do when you wake up every day. But, you know, I was on The Daily Show, which is really a fun show. And I talked about the importance of faith, and then I was at Harvard and talked about 600-700 kids. And this was one of the things that came up. And here's what I think is the truth. I think religion in the 21st century has not evolved. It's really boring and divisive, and we see these religious leaders who divide us and play politics and all this other stuff. But then there are others, and I see it as a positive, a hope, a connectiveness, a place where I can go when I don't feel anybody cares about me or anybody loves me, and I feel like I got somewhere I can go. And so my buddy John, who I mentioned in this book, because if I didn't, he'd be gnashing of teeth from him. No, it wouldn't be. Played a very, very big role in helping me to become a better person. The book has a lot of descriptions about what it's like to run for president. It opens with a harrowing story where half the people on our tiny little airplane thought we were going to crash. And we all wonder, you know, why do these politicians die in these plane crashes? And we've read about a lot of them. In fact, in Virginia, there was a guy who had a lot of potential. I've never mentioned this name in 30 years, named Dick Obenshain. And we've seen it around the country. You know, it's because politicians think they need to go somewhere when they don't really need to go somewhere. And it talks about that flight, but then it gets into a lot about the campaign. And the most significant thing that happened in the campaign is I came to realize that, just like I did when I was governor, over time, because, you know, I started out, my first 100 days were very rocky, until my wife said to me, John, you're the governor of Ohio, which means you're the father of Ohio. Why don't you act like it, okay? And by the way, I related that story to President Trump when I was in the Oval Office. I wasn't trying to imply anything. Just a little story. And so to make a long story short, what I learned in the campaign is that politics is about, you know, issues and, you know, the health bill and the tax cuts and all that other stuff. But I think it's really about the heart and the soul. And I think people in this country want to believe that somebody cares about them. And I'll tell you an interesting thing. It may not be that interesting, but when the Olympics were over and I watched the swimming, and these guys, decided I wanted to look like them. So I took up swimming at the end of August. And no, seriously, I'd never been really swimming. This was just unbelievable. And people were laughing at me. I didn't know, but I know they were because it's been told to me. And, so one day I went swimming, and my wife happened to be in the pool, and I dropped my smartphone. I don't know if Doug has my smartphone. It's a really smart smartphone. I can't be hacked on it because it's a flip phone. Okay? I dropped it in the water, and it was ruined. And my wife, I was afraid to go down because I'm so bad to go down and get it, so she went down and got it. I called Verizon. They said, "Come on over." And so they said, you know, we'll get this done for you in 15 minutes. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Verizon, but there isn't anything that ever happened in 15 minutes, okay? So it was like 15 hours, and finally they gave me my phone, and they had you've all been there, right? And I said, "What do I owe you?" And they said, "Well, because we had you wait so long, we're going to give you this phone for free." And I go, "Free phone?" And there's like 50 people. So I said, "This is really incredible." Juxtapose this to the United Airlines flight, really. And the lady who's running the store, she said to me, "Well, this is nothing, because last week a lady brought her smartphone in, and we had screwed it up. And we fixed it, and we gave it back to her, and she said, 'Well, what do I owe you?' And they said, 'It's our fault. You don't owe me anything.'" And she said the woman started to become emotional. And she looked at the manager and she says, "Nobody does anything like this for anybody anymore." So you know what I did? I called the CEO of Verizon. By the way, for the next 18 months, I can call about anybody I want. After that, not so good. So if any of you want to get in the Cleveland Clinic, ask me now. I always say if you're a politician, there's nothing more former than a former any politician, because you don't need a phone, though, because nobody will take your calls and no one will ever return them. I even write about this in the book. When I left Congress, the year before I left, I was invited, I think, to 41 or 42 Christmas parties, and the year I left, I got invited to 2, and one of them was my own. But anyway, I called the CEO of Verizon, and I told him about this woman. And I said, "You need to do something about this," and her assistant, who was a cool guy too. And so he went on some sort of talk to all the people at Verizon, which they do, and celebrated these two people. The point of the story is, we all want to feel like, well, it's back to Cheers, that somebody knows our name, that somebody cares about us, that somebody will celebrate with us. And that doesn't mean that policy doesn't matter, but in the course of policy, we have to keep in mind that what this means for people. And we have to connect our hearts. And we all have to do it. Now, I know that these problems seem immense, but you see, I think that we can fix the country if we're willing to take this on ourselves. One of my friends said to me the other day, he said, "You're not giving people enough sense of what they can do to fix this." He said, "Why don't you ask everybody to at least spend 10 minutes every day reading something that they don't agree with?" I happen to think that driving things from the bottom up where we live, whether it's engaging in a program to mentor kids, or whether it is going to the food bank, or even so simple as rounding up so that you can help support the food bank, or whether it's fighting the opiate crisis, because the DEA has told me the only way we will win this battle is if we educate people, starting at a very young age and all the way through, and that's on all of us, even with people we don't know. So I went to Atlanta at the invitation of Bernice King. Martin Luther King's daughter invites me to go to Atlanta at the Martin Luther King Center. I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I go down, and I had my daughter Reese, and we went through the house and took a picture outside of Dr. King's house. And then I walked down the street. I didn't know how to say this to people because it sounded a little self-congratulatory, but a lot of people down there, almost all African Americans, I could feel their warmth. Like, he's okay. He's a good guy. Boy, that was unbelievable to me. And then we went to this, I was interviewed, and then they went to the audience, which was 300-400 people, and somebody shouts out, "What about Trump?" And I said, "Sir, what about your neighbor? What about your family?" Dr. King couldn't even get a meeting with the politicians. So he started in his community based on moral principles. And then black and white and rich and poor and blue and red and all this other nonsense, political nonsense, we all joined together. And we demanded justice. and the condition of morality in the country on the issue of race. He didn't do it from the top down, he did it from the bottom up. So I think all of us have to do our part. Stop waiting on somebody else to show up and fix your problem, because they ain't coming. Unless they're maybe your neighbor, or maybe your relative, or just somebody who could be a stranger that sees you having a problem. Now, this all sounds great. I wish I wasn't a jerk sometimes, okay? Because we all fall short. You know, we live our life, and I'll conclude here, we live our life at a base level. We just kind of go about the humdrum of our day. But every once in a while, we do something that's a little bigger than ourselves. I just gave a medal to a guy who was a bus driver who stopped his bus in the middle of traffic and talked a woman jumping off a bridge. And I gave him a medal because, and he didn't tell, this went viral, and nobody knew about this except the camera on the bus captured it. And did he change the world? Yeah. I gave him this medal, you know, and I said, did you ever think you'd get a medal? And he said, it's nothing I ever thought about. But that's all we have to look for. And some days we're going to live in the basement. It's inevitable. We do something that we're embarrassed by, or, you know, I'll sign up to that first. But, you know, in life we have a chance to get up every day and do a little bit better. So that's kind of the way I think about it. Slow down a little bit, pay attention to somebody else, and that goes for me, John. Hear me? Okay? Because it's true.